Hi, I am Laura Willard. I'm a freelance editor. This is my YouTube channel, and today I have Jackie Lea Sommers here talking about publishing, and I'm going to let her take it away.
I'm Jackie. I write young adult novels. My first novel, Truest, came out in September 2015, and I have another one coming out in probably the summer of 2018.
How was the yes from your agent different from the yes from your editor? Did it feel like the yes from your agent was really exciting, but then by the time you got the editor, you were like, finally? Or was it still the same amount of excitement?
It was more exciting to get the yes from the editor, although they were both really, really exciting. But it was a lot less fanfare from my agent. It was just an email like, hey, I really liked this. I'd like to offer you representation kind of thing. But when it was the yes from HarperCollins, it was a phone call from my agent who kind of sneakily so he didn't, I think he wanted to tell me over the phone, and so he didn't tell me. He just said that the editor had a question for me.
Sneaky.
Yeah, and so then he called, and you know, the question was basically related to like the book deal. So it was really fun and really exciting, and it was for 2 books, which was not something that I was really expecting. So yeah, it was very exciting, and I was out on the veranda at the university where I work, and like people are walking by, and I'm all like, a book deal. So yeah, that was well, and plus that one involved money, so that one was definitely the big phone call.
Yeah.
So. Mm-hmm.
So, who was the first person that you told?
Actually, it happened to be that my mentor was walking by, and so I got to tell her first, and then I called my dad after that. Nice. So, yeah, and then I didn't know if I was allowed to like tell people yet, because one thing that really surprised me was that the offer came long before the contract. Like, I got the offer in November, but I didn't actually sign my contract until like February, maybe. Mm-hmm. And actually, from talking to a lot of other writers, they've said the same thing. In fact, some of them, it took even longer than that. But that was not something that was on my radar at all. So I guess I kind of thought, you know, you get the offer, and then like, you know, I don't know, like a week later you'd sign the contract and then you could tell everyone, because I kind of felt a little weird about announcing it before I actually signed anything. But so they told me on a Wednesday, and then finally by Friday I was just like jumping out of my skin. So I was like, am I allowed to tell people? And they said, oh yeah, absolutely, kind of like they figured I would know that. And so then I told people, and I'm glad that I had asked that, because I don't think I could have sat on that news for 4 months before signing the contract. So
then after you signed the contract, how long was it until your book was in stores?
So I signed the contract, I think, in February 2014, and the book came out in September 2015. So another year and a half. So from when I got the book deal until it came out was almost 2 years. All of 2014 was editing, just the whole year. I learned a lot about myself, about writing, about the partnership between an editor and the author during that time. It was a huge year for learning. And then we mostly had things wrapped up with the book being completed by 2015. But even then, like in the months leading up to publication, I still would have requests from my editor to make changes or add scenes or take things out or whatever. We were still making small change. There's actually a fairly, well, I think it's kind of a big change from the arc to the actual publication. A whole scene is, there's certain parts that are deleted and stuff that's added. That to me felt like really last minute, because by the time the advanced reader copy was out, you know, you're feeling like this is pretty set, except for maybe if they find like errors or like typesetting or whatever. But no, we still made some big editorial like changes. So
I heard an author saying recently, and I can't remember who it was. I want to say Shannon Hale, but I know it isn't, so I just did, but it wasn't her. But somebody was talking about how they added a complete new character from the advanced review copy to the book that's actually in stores. So if you have the arc, it's always fun to read it, but that's definitely not the finished, even polished.
Yeah.
I mean, you know it's not corrected, but it could be a totally different book.
Yeah. Ultimately, I really like it. My editor had great ideas. So. Mm-hmm.
So you gush about your editor on social media, and I know that you love working with her. Yes. What is the best thing about working with an editor that you hadn't considered, and what is the most terrifying thing?
So the scariest for a debut novelist, not really knowing who ultimately has the power. I just didn't know if her suggestions were law or if I had a voice in that. And I found out that I really did, which was really fantastic. And I think part of it too is I take all of her advice unless I feel like it's absolutely not my vision for the book, in which case I will speak up. And actually I'll even at that point, I'll usually like try her ideas, and then if I'm not feeling it, or I feel like it's going against what my kind of vision for the book is, then I'll say something. So I let my editor win like 97% of the time, but I think because of that, like, she understands that the 3% where I like push back, she knows is really, really important to me, because I usually, you didn't just disregard her advice all the time. Yep, exactly. So that was the scariest, hardest part, was figuring that out and feeling powerless until having some of those conversations with her. So that was good. And then the best part is that, and I don't know exactly how to describe this, but like with an editor, an author can actually be better. Like you can be better than you are. that came out so weird. There's kind of a brink of talent that I know that I have, but because of my editor, I went past that personal limit of mine, and that is huge to me, because it kind of feels like without the editor, you can only take it so far, and but with someone brilliant behind it, you can go. You can pass the limits of your own talent. So that's awesome to me. And I had always, and I don't have anything against self-publishing. I think that it's awesome, and it really depends on from author to author what is going to work best for them. But I've realized that for me, working with an editor like will take my book beyond where I can go myself. So, which probably sounds obvious to people, but I guess maybe it wasn't obvious to me before I did it. Yeah, everybody's path is different, and it depends on how much control they want, or if they want to collaborate or not. So let's talk about reviews. How do you deal with good reviews and not so good reviews? My earliest reviews were all really positive, so they were really exciting to read. Before I don't read negative reviews. If I go on to Goodreads, I only really look at 5-star reviews, because that I don't think is necessarily smart, but it's smart for me because I just carry it too much. And so you can't win over everyone. So I want to make myself happy with what I'm writing, and my editor happy, and and, you know, of course I want readers to be happy too, but I just, for a while I replaced going to Goodreads at all. I had it automatically reroute to the Calming Manatees page.
So every time you logged on to see Goodreads, it would show you a happy manatee.
Yeah, and it's So Mackenzie Lee, she's another white author. She was the one who suggested that, and
she wrote This Monstrous Thing.
Yes, and she, and so it's great because then these like manatees will be like, "Girl, let me brush your hair," and so it was just kind of like, for a while, I just didn't like look at reviews at all, and then I just looked at the good ones. And after a while, because I think my first negative review, what's funny about it now to me is that it wasn't that negative.
Yeah. But
because the earliest reviews were like so good, like when I got one that was like, I liked it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And then like I think I shared it with like my other like debut novelists, and they were like, if this is your like bad review, like you're really lucky. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to handle this. And then Calming Manatees was put into place. And so, so really I don't really look at bad reviews from strangers. I have had a couple people, like friends who, well, most people in my life are really supportive and really like the novel, and if they don't, they
keep their mouth shut.
Yeah, they don't tell me. But I did have one friend who was kind of vocal about some of the choices that I made, and that was kind of hard. But my grandpa's reading it right now, which is terrifying.
Sex scenes.
Yeah. So, yep.
We'll find out.
He said he told me he was on like chapter like 7 or 17 the other day or something, and I was just like, great, thanks for reading it. Actually, like, didn't bother me at all to have like my parents or my siblings read it, but grandpa feels really different.
Yeah.
So,
So, by the way, Truest has an average of 4 stars on Goodreads, and a 3 is I liked it, and a 4 is I really liked it. So if you haven't read it yet, go check it out. And if you don't like it, don't tell us. Just keep it to yourself. You can put it on Goodreads, but we're not going to read it.
Exactly.
So talk about marketing Truest.
I have a friend who is a graphic designer. She did some of it. I did some of it myself. Did printing through things like Moo, but I also had like a street team. So I had 20 people who read the book in advance, and whom I sent exclusive scenes that were in the book and stuff like that. And then their job was to kind of help me promote it, I guess. I started things way too early. Basically, if someone reads about a book that they are interested in and they want to purchase it right away.
Yeah.
And if they can't purchase it right away, then I think it kind of falls off their radar. So I started kind of hitting the marketing trail about like 2 months before the book came out, maybe 2.5 or something. And that was just too early, which is
2 months is too early.
Which is really surprising for me, because of my experience with college recruiting. But really, like, with my next book, I will probably start about a week before.
Which is crazy because pre-sales are so important.
Right, yeah. Yeah, but ultimately, yes, that's true. That's just true. But
a lot of people don't pre-sale. Way more people will buy it right away if they like it.
Yeah, and I mean, my network is still, my like platform and, everything with social media is still not tremendously extensive. And so pre-sales from what I'm promoting are mostly going to be like friends and family.
Yeah.
And like people who are like faithful readers of my blog and stuff like that. People who are probably going to buy it anyway. So, but yeah, like to really hit things hard, probably especially like the week that it comes out, and doing some online ads and stuff like that. But I did like a whole bunch of different things, like trying to kind of figure out what would work best. And what I would probably do in the future is just find one great thing and do a lot of that. So
I kind of liked your variety of quotes, because there were some that I absolutely loved, and other ones, they were cool, but some of them I just
yes, I agree with
totally.
that.
But that was on Pinterest and stuff. That wasn't like printing.
It was. I did print those. And that's not exactly what I mean. Like I did that, I consider one thing.
Okay.
I also did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did a variety of different things. But I do like, yeah, I did like having the different quotes and images and stuff like that, because I think that really appealed to a lot of teen readers. And sometimes I would bust them out at like college fairs where I was recruiting for my school, and people would be really interested in it. So, which I felt like I'm promoting my school's English program. And, it was, yeah, so I really liked that, but I would probably just do a lot of that versus trying all these other things that weren't ultimately as good.
How do you know when a manuscript should be shelved? So whatever happened to your adult manuscript, or plural, and will they ever see the light of day?
Yes, Truest is just the second novel that I've written. The first novel was the novel for adults. It will not be published. I had to really learn how to even write a novel, like something novel length, because I never really thought that I had enough patience and endurance I focused on poetry when I was in school, because, you know, you can
crank one out a day.
Yeah, and then revisions and stuff even if they take a couple weeks, that's just different than tackling a project that you're going, okay, I might be working on this for 4 years or more or something. So, so I had to kind of figure out how to be a novelist first, and then ultimately decided, that I wanted to write about teen protagonists. And so then, that changed everything. But at that point, then I was like, I knew how to sort of write a novel. I don't know if we ever really know how to write a novel, because now I'm writing another one, and I feel like I'm learning all over again what to do. But I do see places where like I've grown a ton. When I first started writing a manuscript, like a book length manuscript, it wasn't a novel. It was actually more of like a memoir. And so I had to learn how to write like a novelist, like to think in terms of moving a plot forward and approaching a climax, and what it would be like to resolve things, and to really focus on characters first. And it just wasn't those things. I just had to learn all of that. And so now, kind of continuing with that growth, I do have that first novel was a very thinly veiled kind of
autobiography.
Yeah, a girl with obsessive compulsive disorder. Yeah.
Didn't she recruit at a college?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, she was 100%. Yeah, it was me, but with better luck with boys. And I have a second or third draft of a manuscript about a teen boy with OCD who there are certain elements from that first novel that I think I might be able to pull into this other story. But it's a totally different story. Yeah. It just happens to have a character who is also dealing with clinically diagnosed obsessive compulsive disorder. Yeah, so I'm hopeful that there are some elements that I can rescue from that first novel, but as is, no, I don't think that I would ever want it to be published.
No go set a watchman on that.
No. No. This is my living will. No. Yeah, and so after writing Truest and that going out on submission, I wrote a first draft of another novel, YA novel, and then I worked on that for maybe, I don't know, 6 months maybe, and then ultimately decided that I wanted to write this other story about this boy with OCD. So then I worked on that for 14 months, and then my editor and I decided to, and it was my idea, decided to put that on the back burner and pick up the other novel that I had spent like the 5 or 6 months on, and that is now what I've been working on this all of 2016. So I was actually working on a totally separate novel for like all of 2015, and then switched it up in January, I think. And so with the hopes of having this novel good to go by next summer so that it could come out the summer after that.
Okay. Yeah.
It takes a lot longer than you would ever imagine, like just the whole process, but ultimately I mean it's great because you're getting, tons of copy editing and finding all of these errors that you never could see because you have spent so much time with the manuscript. And also that like getting a really quality cover and knowing all the things that are happening behind the scenes with selling the book to distributors and that kind of thing. So I get it now, like why it takes so long, and it's good. It's worthwhile. It's worth the wait.
So let's talk about the cover of Truest.
Yep.
How did that come to be?
Yep. So it was designed by Jenna Stemple, and
she's a designer for Harper.
And she's fantastic. And so first I got 8 different like concept ideas and was asked my opinion on them. And ultimately I wanted to go a different direction than Harper ended up going, but I'm really glad that they did. They know more about it than I do, and I love the way that the cover turned out. So really they did ask me for my opinion, but did not take it, which is okay because they are smarter at this than I am. And then I weighed in on a couple things on the design that they did choose with, just some ideas that I had or things that felt different to me. Like I think
West was wearing a dress.
She was wearing a dress, and she wears a dress like once in the novel, so it just didn't feel like accurate to her. Yeah. And the I think her hair was like short and it's long in the novel, so they just switched like the model. I didn't want any faces in on my cover, and the cover originally did, but then when they replaced it, it's a girl from the back with long hair and not a dress on. And like even the title, Jenna hand like painted. It's so beautiful. And originally they had kind of fading out because there's a theme in the book where West always talks about feeling blurry, but ultimately I was like, but that's not what she ultimately decides of herself. So I asked that it just be solid. And at first they weren't going to make that change, but they did. And so I feel like it was really good compromises between what they knew would be best and what I, as the author, wanted. So, yeah, so it worked out really well. I'm really happy with it. I love it. I think that Jenna is brilliant, and just a design genius, and she's awesome.
And you just sold your book to get German rights, right?
So actually that happened a long time ago, but I just got paid for it.
and it has a new title.
Yeah.
Because Truest isn't a German word.
So, I mean, there is a word people have told me that could work for Truest, but ultimately, they went with a long German title that basically translates to something like fortune or whatever may come. Yeah, so I'm excited about it. Wes's name is different in the translation, which is really different.
Did you have any say over that?
Yes. They wanted to change her name to Lynn because her name is Westlyn, and they wanted to change her name to Lynn, and I just try to be as accommodating as I can unless I feel like I really can't, if that makes sense. And for that, I was like, go for it. And then, and so that'll be different because it does feel a little bit like, I started working on this novel back in the very beginning of 2012. So it does feel a little bit like having a 4.5-year-old child that someone is ultimately being like, oh, we're actually gonna change the name of your baby. And you're like, oh, okay. Okay, as long as you only do that in Germany, I guess. So, so that's really different. But that'll be really fun to see what they do with the cover and everything. And I feel I'm pretty much very hands off with this translation because I don't speak German, and I don't, so if they do have questions like, is this title okay? Is it okay if we change Wes's name? That goes to my agent, then to me, and I get to sign off on it, I guess. But ultimately, someone was asking me like, oh, do you think that the translation will be really good? And I said, well, I'll never know. So
you'll have to get a copy though, because German book designers are seriously the best in the world.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what they do with the book cover, and of course they want it for my shelf. And I do have a friend I have a couple friends who are fluent in German, so I guess I could ultimately find out like how close of a translation it is, but
you could teach yourself German.
Yeah, that sounds like a good use of my time.
Rather than writing, just read the book that you already wrote and then translate it.
Exactly. So, so that's kind of happening in the background right now while I'm working on book 2, which honestly has been a lot harder than writing Truest. I think that part of that comes from, so with Truest, I wrote it on my own timeline. It didn't matter, I wasn't under contract, so it didn't matter if it took 40 years to write it, like I could do whatever I wanted with it. And then when I got an agent and an editor for it, they were actually signing on to a specific book that they loved and believed in. And then getting a 2-book deal, it's basically like, yes, we're signing this book that we love and also a book that we hope to love based off of
not any pressure.
Based off of your potential. And so so there's that feeling of, I don't know if you'll love this. Like you bought this sight unseen, it wasn't written, and so that's weird. That's a weird feeling. And then also like just being on like a timeline and having to turn things in adds pressure to the writing experience that I hadn't really had since college, when you have homework assignments that are due and now all of a sudden it's similar. So it has been harder than the first in some ways. In some ways it's not because now know my editor better, and we have a great working relationship, and I was able to kind of figure out that partnership during the first book. But it's a whole separate beast to write a second book. And I was just talking to my agent about it the other day. He said, if I hadn't had so many authors tell me this about book 2, he said, I just wouldn't even think it's a thing. He said, but it is. He's like, people have this like book 2 paralysis. And so for me too, like I write contemporary and standalone books, so it's a whole separate world and all new characters and everything, instead of just writing like book 2 of like a trilogy or something where you already have. Yeah. So, starting from scratch. So it's been, I don't know, everything that I do is in my writing career, I have probably done wrong. But ultimately,
Rowling said that too, though. So I think it's not just you.
Well, that's good.
She said she just wings it. So
it's just you look back on it and realize like, oh, I should have done this. I should have done this. I should have done this. But you don't know. If you just don't know that on the front end, and so I've had to explore and kind of experience failures and, work on a novel for 14 months and then set it aside and start over and have to push back publication dates and stuff like that because it just wasn't working, or it wasn't the book that I was supposed to write at that point. And so, part of that I'm just like, that's just life. You just have to experience that as you go.
Do you regret writing the novels that you've shelved, or have they helped you writing?
No, I don't regret it at all. I don't think I could have written Truest without writing that first adult novel. And then I couldn't. The book that I'm writing right now that takes place on an island, the reason I had set it aside was that I didn't feel confident enough or mature enough to write the ending that it needed. And then in the time since setting it aside and picking it back up, I had some really cool experiences that made me ready to pick it back up. And so, so it is, I can look back on it and be like, I could not have moved forward with that book at that point, but now I can. And so I kept myself busy with a different novel, which I do hope to, go back to that novel and finish that. Hopefully that will be, my third book. I had to, there was a book by Huntley Fitzpatrick that I needed to read before I could go back to the novel that I'm writing right now. And then I actually got to meet and hang out with Huntley at a book conference thing in Chicago, and got to chat with her about a bunch of stuff. And so it was kind of like, those were the things that I needed in order to move forward and go back to the book that I had been writing that got stalled. So, yeah. So no, I don't regret those things at all. Ultimately there's just so many, you just can't regret all of the work that leads up to great work, because you can't jump right into great work. I don't know anyone who can, and like Anne Lamott says, we wouldn't even like that person anyway, right? And so, I've been writing since I was a kid and telling stories before I could write. And, you just can't regret that, because that's all just your foundation for what will ultimately, hopefully, become your first book.
Well, that's all I've got. So
great. Thank you.
For coming.
Yeah. This was great. Thanks so much.
Yeah.